Do you polish your work? Do you go through a process of rewriting and tearing up pages?
Well, here I will confess a frustration, and I have discussed this with some American friends, because I was so out of context, because almost at some point there seemed to be no possibility of publishing, and because my handwriting is so bad, I write. I don't write, I typewrite. So that means that I do a lot of corrections as I type, and I tear up things, you know? And I guess it was to give myself the illusion that I was approaching the book. If I had to do by longhand and then type, when I knew that the possibilities of publication were very remote, that would be too painful. So I think I started typewriting in order to create the illusion of the book. So I do polish, but I polish as I write, as I typewrite.
You often seem to be writing in a surrealistic, automatic manner, which reminds us of, I think, the spell of dreams. Could you say that you write under the influence of the subconscious? How would you describe your poetry?
Well, I think there is an influence of the subconscious in the sense of form one has. I think a lot of the work of the poet is done. I think maybe even to be in contact with the subconscious, if I am depressed and I sleep, I oversleep, it's an effort to be in touch with the subconscious. But I am a bit distrustful of automatic writing. I was going to say, I want to generate a kind of automatic reading as opposed to automatic writing, which is what we need now. But anyway, I think automatic writing has become just another literature. One of the dangers of literature is literature. That might have its moment, and it was useful and necessary tool. And I think I trust more a superconscious writer. I think there is more of the subconscious in the superconscious than in the pretense to automatism. I don't know if I have...
Oh, I think you have answered. Another thing I would like to ask, I've noticed that you like to quote authors. And you have quoted, for instance, Gertrude Stein as saying, "I've always been fond of books that have short quotations at the head of each chapter." Now, do you like quoting other writers because you're fond of the sound of words, or because you're interested in the message they convey, or just because you think that it's a repetition throughout the centuries of similar thoughts?
Well, remember I studied at university, and I think it's my revenge on the university, the way I quote. In university, they use the authoritative quote. In other words, you talk to a professor, and the professor says, Aristotle said, nobody can say anything else because the quote is there. Everybody's supposed to be, it's almost a form of censorship. There is ornamental quoting, where you pretend to embellish something by quoting or pretending that you have vast knowledges. I think the function I see for quoting is almost a choral. It's not the voice in the desert. Writing is in a tradition. You write against, in favor of, stressing, underlining a certain tradition. So I want to incorporate that tradition. Specifically in Gertrude Stein's case, this one quote, it's a tribute to her. Here, she had great pleasure in books that open with a quote. So I opened my book with her quote about the pleasure of opening a book with a quote. It's a mirroring effect. Means that the book, that one book, almost begins in infinity. There is no outside and inside to language. Everything that's outside is inside. It's almost like a Möbius strip, no?
Now, do you feel that you are living in exile, or do you now identify with the United States?
I think if you took my room and put it in China, I wouldn't realize it for the next 3 months. Or you put it in Africa. I think I live very much... I am very careless about my clothing, but I'm very careful about my walls. By the way, I write... all right, I write in order to be close to the subconscious, I write naked, almost as naked as I can. But I do have walls that are covered with items that are beautiful to me or seem beautiful. I think I'm very much then like one of those animals that carries its shell with them. I think if they took me with my room on top and moved me elsewhere, it would take me a while.
What are the circumstances in your life that have influenced you?
I think one massive influence, almost massive like a hemorrhage, was the theme of exile. I think the theme of exile just made the schizoid tendencies I might have just more dramatic. We were talking a while ago of why, for example, I think in the English-speaking world, there is less of a tradition of exile. You have the voluntary exile of Joyce, whereas in the non-English world, you have a greater tradition of exile. And I think the reason is ultimately linguistics. In English, the question is to be or not to be, because the verb to be refers to both place and being. In Spanish, the question is to be and not to be. It is possible to be and not to be in Spanish because you have two verbs. So I think from very early on, our very literature, our very language taught me the lesson of exile. Cuban poetry in the 19th century. One of the poets I admire, Sequeira, became mad in 1821. He thought when he put his hat on, he turned invisible. Nápoles Fajardo, one time he left Santiago de Cuba, he was never seen again. Martí lived most of his life in exile. So I think the Cuban tradition is a lesson in invisibility, which is the opposite of what's happening here. Maybe I'm a liar.